This is the meeting of the Community Preservation Committee for February 1st, 2023. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, in accordance with the Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, public bodies otherwise governed by the OML are temporarily relieved from the requirement that meetings be held in public places, open and physically accessible to the public, so as long as measures are taken to ensure public access to the body's deliberations through adequate and alternative means. This meeting will be live on Zoom. The public may participate remotely by joining Zoom, meeting ID number of 840-0877-2826, or by calling 929-205-6099. For additional information about remote participation, please contact Carly Antonellis, the Assistant Town Manager, at atm@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8220, extension 100, prior to the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. Again, we are going to send a little card to Barry. He is recuperating quite nicely after his surgery, and he's sorry he can't attend. Little, one step at a time. So I think that works out a lot better. So believe me, I know we all wish him well. I'm going to ask everybody, did you have a chance to look at the agenda? I know Dennis, forgive me, I did not send it to you. I didn't know whether or not, okay. But can I get a motion to accept the agenda unless there's any changes?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Colleen makes the motion. Someone second it?
Second.
All right, just seconds. All right, roll call. Julie?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Colleen?
Aye.
Jason?
Yep.
Jess?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. So the agenda as written. Then the approval of the minutes. And these are the minutes that our wonderful, excellent clerk
Of course.
generates as of the January 4th meeting. Again, I thought I didn't find anything that needed correction. Anybody else? No. That being said, can I get a motion to accept the minutes as written, please?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
All right, Colleen makes the motion. Can I hear a second?
Seconded.
All right, Julie seconded. All right, roll call. Jess?
Aye.
Jason?
Yep.
Colleen?
Aye.
Beth?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Aye, and the chair says aye, so it's been accepted. All right. Next on the agenda is quickly correspondence and invoices. We did get an invoice that I had to question. The invoice was from the Community Preservation Coalition. They went ahead and said that they didn't change the dues from last year, and all of a sudden, last year was $875, and this year was $2,875. So it's like, well, if you said you didn't change, how come I'm showing a $2,000 difference? And it's because we are now at 3%. So we are in the category, instead of being at the lower category, we're in the 500,000 to 749,999 category, which adds another 2,000 to the bill. So I told them that I really can't give the okay until I speak with you guys, because I just wanted to make sure that, we understood why there was a difference. Anybody have any questions or concerns? I mean, it sort of makes sense if
I don't have his response in front of me right now, but I will say he very kindly highlighted, what the needs are for that and why it goes up with our 3%, like the ratio of how it went up to what we're getting still felt quite in line. So I was in support of what's happening.
All right. And if people want to, I mean, I can forward that to everybody if they want to see Stewart's response.
Mhm.
I just, like I say, don't want to overwhelm you guys with a whole batch of emails. All right. So, pardon?
It's fine with me.
Okay. All right. So, I'll pass that on to the town so that we can get it paid. All right. Then the other correspondence that we do have is Annika from NOAA with regards to Air Commons is looking for a commitment letter for the $400,000 of CPA funds for the phase one of Air Commons. I'm going to generate something. I'd like to generate something with Alan and with Alicia that we've, we'll go ahead and say that it's conditional on an executed grant agreement because we need to get that grant agreement, again, I haven't done it yet, developed to make sure that the housing is going to be, all affordable. In I'm going to use the words in perpetuity. However, I have a funny feeling, again, because of the state grants, it may end up being a 99. I know we've had this discussion, a 99 year instead of in perpetuity, because many of those grants, they don't like to have something with those wording. So with that, but I wanted them to know, yeah, we can give it to you, but we do have to have an executed grant agreement. And hopefully I can go ahead and get that generated and sent on to you guys, because we still need the other ones developed as well. So does that sound like a plan?
It does.
All right. Okay, so those are really the correspondence and invoices that I had. Did anybody else receive anything with regards to CPC?
Oh.
Oh.
I didn't. I just had a question though regarding the grant agreement for the housing project. So you would develop it and then they could review it and then we could review it
Yes.
before it gets, right? Just wanted to clarify that. Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
No problem. Yep. Okay. All right, current business, we've got, well, before I hit current business, I know it's sort of like together, public participation, where we've got Dennis, Curran here. Also too, I want to reiterate that if anybody has any type of questions for the CPC, definitely get in touch with Town Hall, and we do our best to try to turn it around so that we're able to answer your questions or concerns that you might have. If you're not here at the meeting or you're viewing this meeting on cable access, then definitely let us know through Carly, and pretty much I do my best to turn it around.
Hey, Janet,
Yep.
can we get like a cpc@air.ma.us? Like,
We have an
general
email address. We do have it.
Yeah.
That's exactly
Okay.
what the email address is. It's on the,
Okay.
when you go ahead and do the applications, it says, send it to cpc@air.ma.us.
And that goes to Carly.
No, comes to me.
Oh, good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Lucky me. I'll be honest with you, I think that's only been used twice. But it is on our webpage. So I'll verify that too with Cindy. All right. Okay, so with that, public participation and current business, I know Dennis, you've got still possibly some questions, and this is a good team to go ahead and ask, or state your concerns.
Okay, yeah, so first let me apologize. I know that I had talked to Janet before last month's meeting and had planned to kind of pop my head in then, but I got my wires crossed and showed up one day too late for that. So I apologize for having been on the agenda but been absent. I guess, and I don't know a lot of the particulars about how to access CPC funds or how the process would unfold. But I think, and this partly comes out of my recent work with the Council on Aging. I know that the lead time to access funds and to actually get a project started and funded and to get it through the town hall meeting process is quite lengthy, 18 months, 2 years, maybe, depending. So there are just some things that I have been thinking about, and I don't know where CPC would necessarily fall into the funding source for this or the advocacy source. But the first, it would be the Peroni Park ponds, or the water down there below Peroni Park. I know that it is badly contaminated, heavily contaminated, that the source of the contamination might be the tanning, the leather tanning facilities or the Army. That's been well understood for many years. So I guess my question is, what, if anything, could be done to remediate that? How definitive is the nature of the contamination? And it seems like
Dennis,
it could
I'll jump
be
in there real quick. Any contamination down there is not the responsibility of the town of Ayer or the park commissioner or anybody. That has to be like an EPA, federal government come in and come in and clean that. If I'm not mistaken, there was a Superfund site out of Devon's anyway. So I'm not sure where you're going with all this, but I wouldn't even think the town or the CPC could come close to funding a remediation or cleanup of that pond.
No, I absolutely. What I would say is that, and again, it's not, I don't doubt that there are, perhaps the Department of Defense or the property owners who inherited the businesses that were primarily responsible, or whomever. And I understand that the town or any department within the town may not see it as their responsibility to clean it up. But I can't help but feel that having it be cleaned up would be a tremendous asset to the town. It seems like it's in a pretty nice location for a lot of different uses. The fact that it sits there, and whether or not it can be cleaned up, and how much it might cost to clean it up, I'm unclear on. I don't know if a definitive action has been taken to determine that. So I guess my question is, perhaps, and again, this is a perhaps, the CPC could either advocate for town council to research who's ultimately responsible, or to provide seed money to get the legal environmental research to determine the extent of the contamination, if not the cost of the cleanup. Because the alternative to doing that is to simply let it sit there forever, unused, with some caveat that it's never been used and never will be used because it's contaminated. And even if it were to take 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years to achieve some constructive end, it would seem to me that future generations in Ayer would be well served by our doing that.
Dennis, we hear where you're coming from, because believe us, we do see, when we take the walk around the path there and such, that they are beautiful bodies of water. However, I know Jess and Beth, and I have been in touch with Lori Nearing from the people of Ayer Concern for the Environment. It was part of, and it still is part of the, as Jason called it, the Superfund, all due to the leakage from Shepley's landfill. And I know that they've got, some sort of barricade with that. However, that was something that was ongoing for a long time. So when you're, giving, like, say, a number of years, from what I understand, it still is getting money from the EPA Superfund, because that's how expensive it is. And with that, they are the one in control, and they're the ones that come in and they test the water as well. Jess, Beth,
Yeah.
I would just say that a number of years ago, Dennis, the Army cleaned up 2 coves on Plowshop Pond, 2 small coves, and that was millions of dollars. Problem with Grove Pond and Plowshop's private, not, the town doesn't have any public access to that, as far as I know. But they're both artificial ponds created by damming years and years ago. So they're both very shallow ponds. The solution to clean them up would be something like dredging, which is enormously expensive. It'd be millions and millions and millions of dollars. And back to what Jason said, and I think I understand from Lori Nearing, the Army has not been exactly willing to step up and pay more money to clean up more of the pollution. So
Yeah.
no, I understand. We have a reasonably well-funded Defense Department in this country. So would you be in a position, or what would it take to get the EPA and or the Defense Department? And again, I have no idea. Is it you contact the congressman, our federal congressman in the House, our 2 senators, the EPA directly?
I got a couple of thoughts. So one is that this is still really an active and ongoing Superfund and remediation site. Right now, the activities are not focused on additional cleanup. Like Jess said, there were a couple of coves that were cleaned up in the past. These are 2 of the most studied water bodies in the country, and I'm not kidding at all. Like the EPA and the Army have studied these water bodies more than you would believe. I mean, there's so much information and reports available on them. And then the other piece was that there was a barrier installed to prevent any additional sort of seepage from Shepley's Hill landfill, and the ongoing risk of contamination was mitigated so that it's not getting any worse. That said, right now, the actions really involve just monitoring to make sure it's not getting any worse. And so there's restoration advisory board meetings that happen quarterly right now, where the Army Corps and their consultants report out on what's happening at all of the Superfund sites. Not every Superfund site or area of concern is covered at every meeting, but you could certainly reach out to the Army and their consultants, and I can give you information if you're interested in what the status is or seeing the latest reports for these water bodies and the areas of concern that contribute to the concerns there. The other thing is that Massachusetts does have a natural resources damages program. And under normal circumstances, when a contamination event occurs, the party that's responsible for it is there's a legal process that's undertaken to determine whether or not they owe anything to the communities that are subjected to the contamination. This process doesn't really happen when it's a federal government body that is responsible for the contamination. So, if you want to look up that program and speak to them to see if there are any examples or if they have any insight into how to pursue, the type of compensation or cleanup that you're talking about, but it's really way above and beyond what this committee can do, and maybe even the town could do, right? I think it's, but there are processes for handling contamination scenarios and events like that, but it's just so much more complicated when the federal government is involved as a contributing party.
Would the CPC, and again, I'm not asking for any commitments here, but would the CPC be in a position to fund some seed legal work necessary to kind of arrive at those determinations about next steps or who's got the money or who's responsible
No.
or?
Dennis, that's not part of what we call our grid of, when we're looking at open space, and such, it's something that, you'd have to go ahead and purchase to be able to do any type of remediation, but it doesn't fit the grid of, is it fundable by a CPC funds? Okay, we can go ahead and, we can pay for appraisals of property and such, but any type of legal fund like that, CPC funds cannot be used for that.
Okay.
I
So
mean,
You might
Go ahead.
also talk to Lori Nearing and
Correct.
Pace for more information, because they've definitely, been involved with what can be done to push the Army. And they know the obstacles
Mhm.
better
So,
than me.
right, so Dennis, can I share your email address with Lori Nearing?
oh,
And
sure. Yeah, I'm sure she has it.
Okay,
So right now, the CPC does not, you folks, all right. So it's not a fight you want to get into,
We
essentially.
can't.
You can't,
with-
no, in turn, not,
Yeah.
well, on the funding piece or on the advocacy piece. I know that you can't access the funds, obviously.
We're not an advocacy group. So I really appreciate what you care about and what you're saying, Dennis. Like I, as a resident, I am so glad that that's something you're looking at. And I'm so glad I have someone like Beth in my town that has all that knowledge to even answer your question to that level. But none of this pertains to what this group does or how we function. And I know all of us are on multiple boards. So I'm also just going to say, I know we've got a big agenda and this is my second board meeting today. So is there anything else we can discuss on this to bring it to completion?
No, okay, all right. I appreciate your time, everyone.
all right, no problem, and I'll go ahead, like I say, I'll get you in contact with Lori and Beth. Would you mind sending some of the links over to Dennis as well?
Sure, I can do that.
All right, that sounds great. Do you have his email? I mean, I'll give it to you if you need it, so.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Dennis. All right. Okay, that was one of the current businesses. Other than that, I really don't have anything else underneath current. Does anybody else? All right, then for moving on with new business, I'm gonna pass it over to Jason and Jeff with regards to phase 2 for the playground over at Peroni Park. And
Okay.
voila, take it away.
So phase 2 does not include a bridge over Grove Pond to the island, so we don't have to worry about, all that stuff, but
Thank
Anyway.
you. I'm glad.
so I appreciate your time. Obviously, I don't know if you want me to bring up the application and everything, Janet, or if people were able to see that in the email.
I think that,
We're asking for, sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
no. If you just want to go over it, quickly, I don't think you need to bring up the application. If people really need to see it, it is on the website. So,
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to ask Jeff to talk about where we're at, just kind of give an update for everybody in case they're wondering where we're at with the remediation and how that went. And then we'll talk about, the funding, what we're looking for money, the different avenues we're going to try to fund this project, why we're asking for what we're asking for. And then we'll talk about a timeline and, we'll look at some images of the full build out or most of the full build out and any questions from the group here. So with that said, I'm going to let Jeff speak first and then I'll bring up the, the presentation.
Thanks, Jason. And hello, everyone. We've been moving along with this project on its remediation phase. Most of the funding, or a good portion of the funding that we got from your group has gone toward that. So it's incredibly appreciated. I was going to try to be brief for this, and I still will try to be, but I was reminded by Beth that this whole thing started with a study from EPA on Grove Pond. And that just confirms what you were saying, Beth. This, Grove Pond is a heavily studied pond. And that just sampling, one of the samplings EPA did happen to stumble across the arsenic that was in the soil at Pony Park, and then led to the findings that we eventually got to, and then of course led to the closure and everything else that goes with it. So with that said, we've been moving along ever since Mass DEP ordered us to shut down the park, fence it off, and then come up with some form of remediation solution before we could do anything, even open it to the public anymore. After getting the funding available to us on July 1st, we were able to contract a company, Horizon. I don't recall the first part of their name, but they have been doing their work, and they just completed all of the remediation work to remove not just the structure, but all of the soil that was contaminated. Our inspector was able to come out and determine that the soil samples as of now are clear, and we can now go ahead with the next phase of things. And that's big news. It's something that we've been aiming for decades, really, to try to, well, since 2006, since we first found out about this. So to have that site finally cleared, and we'll be having the fence down in a few weeks, and everything smoothed out, and then ready for the next phase. It's very exciting. So that's where we are with the remediation, and ready to move forward with the rebuilding part of the project.
Excellent.
Thanks, Jeff. So as everybody remembers, when we brought this to CPC and the other groups last year, we were going to try to do this as a phased approach, where we had the remediation in phase one, remediation and partial build with phase one, and then maybe one or two more phases after that to have a complete build. And the footprint of the park was going to, the original playground would have been filled with different apparatus, and then we would spill over to, enlarge the footprint with some different nature play and adventure play and things like that. And when we kind of got the big price tag at the time was about $1.5 million to do the whole full rebid and everything, rebuild over phases. So, we got through the remediation, or got into the remediation, I should say. And we started to talk to Beta about the phase one. And we were kind of getting into a little bit of the contingency with the remediation, which isn't unexpected. We just had to, we ended up having to ship the soil somewhere else, which was a little bit more expensive. We had to take a little bit more soil than we initially anticipated. Again, it wasn't necessarily unexpected, but we ate into the contingency a little bit, which ate into some of the funding for what we could have for rebuild. So we were left with sort of a question of what are we going to get for a phase one rebuild, and what do we need beyond that for additional phases. So first thing we did was we put a number on the capital budget and sent it to the capital planning committee. And once we did that, town management, like the town manager, assistant town manager, DPW superintendent, the economic development director, we all got together for a meeting and kind of looked at it and said, well, do we want to piece it together, or do we want to just go for it and do the full rebuild now, and don't do phases, and just put it all out there? And what would that look like? Where would we get the money from? We'd get some from capital, maybe some funding that's available to the select board, and then CPC. So the first part of that, and now let me share my screen. The first part of that was to get a new estimate. So hopefully you can all see my screen. Hopefully these numbers aren't too small. But the first part of that meeting was to get Beta to give us a new cost estimate. If we did it in phases, we kind of run the risk of escalating prices. So it may be more cost effective, whether, you're going to have to take the big chunk, the big spend in a single year, but it's more cost effective to do it, in one, as opposed to trying to build it all together. But the Beta's first full build cost estimate came in at kind of an outrageous price here. And if you look at the bottom line, again, I don't know if that's too small, but it's about $1.8 million to do the full rebid. rebuild. That doesn't include the remediation and stuff that's already been done. This is to actually build a new playground. You look at, we have about 500,000, a little bit more, $550,000 left over from last year from CPC funds and from capital funds. So if you break that down, we would need to get about $1.3 million from their first estimate. So we kind of looked at it and said, well, let's sharpen our pencils here. So we asked Beta to go back and do that. And they came back and took about 300 grand off of that, which is good. So, you know, they over anticipated cost increases for 2023. So talking to the supplier, those cost estimates were a little bit high. They were able to bring it down. But if you look at some of these highlighted fields here, they're sort of overestimating things that we can do ourselves, right? So we highlighted these things and said, we can do these in-house. We can have the town do these. You know, the town's going to pay for them, but we can do them a lot cheaper. Like a new park sign, instead of 9,000, we can do it for about 1,500. We can do that stuff. So we were able to get further down and reduce that total cost with the available funds to just under $1,970,000, call it, right? With contingencies, 15% contingency to do what we need left for funding to do this full bid, to go build without having to phase it out. Capital Planning Committee asked us to do some adults. So, you know, we broke some things out here. So we took out the adults over here. And if we wanted to do that in a single build, we could do it for about $750,000 and do the adults separately. But again, it just didn't make sense to do that. So we're looking for total funding of $970,000 to just get this thing done with.
Jason, could you just explain what are the adults? What does that mean?
Yeah, so adults and adults add alternatives to the bid. So when you basically send out a base bid, you ask for things that you definitely want in the scope of work, but there are other things that you would possibly want them to add on additionally, sort of like an a la carte menu that you can add to the total project. And I don't really fully understand the bid process of a municipal entity, but in talking to Dan Van Schawelitz, we can bid it out so the adults, in a way that somebody can't just give us a low bid with heavy on the adults, and so we have to accept their bid, and then but again, I don't really fully understand the municipal bid process.
Is that, that one more question though, with regards to that alternate nature play area, is that the larger footprint that you're talking about?
No, so that's part of the area that's going to spill out that we built sort of, if you're looking at the park, or if you're in the park, it's sort of behind it, in between the former playground and where the pond is. We may have to move the path a little bit, but it's a little bit beyond the path on one side, and then there's another side portion to the right that would be in between where the playground was and where the path is.
So this is just phase 2. So the additional footprint would be a phase 3?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We don't want to do phases. We're just saying phase 1 essentially became the remediation and removal of the equipment. Phase 2 is going to be the full rebuild that we're looking to do.
Okay.
So
we'd love to just get the funding to do it all without the adults, but we were asked to put in the adults for consideration by capital.
when you look at the figure, the 966,000 at the bottom of the adjusted estimate full build, does that include the number 154,000 for the adult nature play area?
Yep. So that second column is the adjusted estimate full build, and it has all the add alternate stuff. And then the third column is if we just built it without the nature play. And then the fourth column is just the nature play estimates, basically.
So that 154 is already in the 966.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And a big consideration for this was the pour and play surface, which is a big chunk of the money right here. It's almost $300,000 for the pour and play surface. And we almost have to do all of that to begin with anyway. So, you know, we can't necessarily split that across few phases. So we're going to have to take a big chunk of spend just to get that pour and play surface done. That includes the leveling and all the pre-work, and then actually pouring in the surface. Get in there.
Do we?
And then the other big, sorry, go ahead, Beth.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the other big chunk of money here is obviously the play equipment, right? So.
Now, what is that equipment going to be? What type of material? I mean, is it?
Yeah, I mean, there's different materials. It's the composite wood or whatever, the wood composite, plastic, not, Jeff, I don't really know. Maybe you can explain it better than me.
So what are we talking about? What the equipment is?
What's it?
Yeah, the play,
I'm sorry. Are we talking about the play equipment
Yes.
yeah, the materials.
or the material? I'm trying to see what line item we're talking about.
So what is the play equipment going to be made out of? It's going to be like composite material, like
Yes.
the Trex type material.
Right.
Aluminum.
It's just in general, right, what you would see on some playgrounds, but this is going to be more enhanced based on what we saw or heard back from both on our survey and from different public forums we did. People were looking for something that wasn't your classic steel and plastic play structure. So obviously it's still going to be, something that has to be supportive and it's going to last a long time. So it's got to be sturdy. But these particular things, they're going to have more of a natural look to them than your classic steel pipe and plastic slide that you might see in a McDonald's play area or something. So that's where it may have a little higher price tag, but it's obviously a much more enhanced type of play system than you might find at a typical place that doesn't have that. Again, we're not trying for this big
Beyond.
but it's definitely has more of a composite wood look to some of the features.
And beyond that, it's more durable. It's going to last longer, and it's more safe, I guess. It doesn't splinter. It doesn't crack. It doesn't get super hot in the sun. So we might be able to go really super cheap with the equipment, but then we'd have really super cheap equipment that we'd be replacing all the time.
Does it come? I mean, I'm just going to ask this. I mean, there's certain types of guarantees and warranties and everything else like that, correct?
We haven't got to that point, but I would imagine yes, there will be warranties, and where we're going to be having a contractor build this. Where we're going to have it be built by a vendor. I think that helps us in the warranty, where we're not going to just give it to a bunch of people and I know we talked about in the past having like the community come together and build something, but at least this big structure here, we're going to have that be done by a vendor. So it's done right, and it gives us more warranty options and less liability.
Okay, thank you.
To further that point, the original structure, I mean, that was the whole story, right? That it was made of something that wasn't guaranteed. And then we found out later that it was arsenic laced wood. And then when we found out, it was too late and the company was disappeared and we couldn't get any money back from them. So yeah, I think we're going to do a lot of due diligence on this to make sure that there is some forms of guarantees, at least for, whatever the company, the standard for that business is. And so I think we're definitely going to be going there pretty heavily.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions on these lines before I go sort of to the next slide to talk about the funding sources?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. So the play equipment in terms of the components of it, like, has that been shared with the public now? Is it still kind of the same that would have been shared at, the last public meeting or something like that? And then for the nature play area, is that designed now or still an estimate of, sort of outside of the footprint and incorporating the slope going down to the pond? Is that still like a just kind of conceptual estimate, or is there a design for that now?
Yeah, that's great questions. First question, it's basically the equipment that was shown in the public meetings that people liked. So, and I'll show you the images of those. So those have been decided on by the commission that those are the components we want to go forward in the original footprint. As far as the nature, I guess maybe this should be labeled differently as adventure play, because there's sort of those two components. If you remember, Beth, there's the nature play and the adventure play.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't designed that yet. The adventure play is going to have a little bit more pre-constructed equipment, things that we'll buy from a vendor. But the nature play area, to your point, is something we're hoping to take advantage of the natural landscaping. We've reserved some of those stumps that we cut down from we like, this is the nuclear thing, but we cut some trees down. We kept those trunks, so a lot of those trunks and branches to reuse for that type of thing. So we're hoping, when we get into that, Beth, we'd like you to probably be part of that too, and like the redesign of that, to utilize some of the stuff that we already have, and maybe get some of these boulders from these construction sites that are all around town. So we haven't got to that point of design yet, but and those are the types of things that we can sort of hopefully do ourselves, or
Right.
Bring in volunteer groups to do to build that type of stuff.
Yep.
So we'll see when we get to that, but we will hopefully have Beta help us with some
Right.
concepts, and so we're not just flying blind there.
And what is planned for the fencing around the area, just to contain young children and things? And then have you considered any of the fundraising opportunities, like, for a picket fence type thing, where like other, parks have done, where, families or Boy Scouts and groups can buy a picket that has a message or their name on it, and then, that's part of the fundraising campaign?
Yeah, good question. We're just going to put a 4-foot black vinyl chain link fence around the original footprint. So that's budgeted in there. But one of our commissioners is looking into spearheading a buy a brick or brick sponsorship. He talked to the field committee, a member from the field committee, and I guess they were able to raise about $30,000 in their brick initiative. So I'm not sure if that's a lofty goal, but he's going to take that on. So something like that. So I think we may go in like that type of area where people can buy a brick and sponsor it.
If they're going to,
And we talked about, yep, go ahead.
with regards to the bricks that are up at the athletic field, make sure that they work with, if it's going to be the same company, the imprints are already wearing down on the ones over at the field. So it has to be deeper of a engraving. So that's all. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's good to know. We'll definitely pass that on. So, we've talked about fundraising efforts. We talked about going for grants and everything. We're still going to do that. Still going to try to put those together, but those are sort of unknown. those are sort of unknown funding sources. What we're trying to do is secure funding sources from the town through CPC, through capital, and through some possible funding sources that are available to the select board. Those are known entities, right? That doesn't mean that we can't get a grant, that we can't do fundraising and not use the funding from the town, right? So that's sort of where we're at now. We're not saying no to these opportunities. Like Alan didn't say no, he's not going to go for grants, but he's saying that they're tough to get. So he's not going to guarantee that we're going to be able to get grants, and I don't blame him. We're going to try maybe to do some brick fundraising or some, we'll try to maybe find an avenue to do some fundraising too. But we don't know. It's hard to estimate what we can get from that and count on it at this point, where we're at. So let me go to the next thing here. So this is from the actual application. So we're looking for $500,000, and that sounds like a big number from CPC. A lot more than we asked for last year, but I think there's a couple things to keep in mind. We're trying to do the full build here. If we did it in phases, we would ask for some money this year, and we would ask for some more money next year. So we're probably going to ask for about the same amount over 2 years. We're just doing it in 1 year. Right now, we're looking at about $300,000 that we're going to ask capital for, and we're meeting with them tomorrow, so we don't know. But again, we're hoping there's some funding sources that are available to the town that the select board can release to us. We don't know that. The first step, though, in talking to capital, they asked us, and the select board, they asked us to ask CPC for this amount. We'll see what we get from there. That's the first step. Second step, I'm not really quite sure if it's select board or capital, but they said, go to CPC, ask for this much money. Then come to capital, ask, we'll see what what we want to do there, and then we can fill in the remaining of the funds through this other funding source.
Could I ask one question on what you've got on the screen that has the total 1.5 million? But on the previous one, you were saying the estimated full bill cost was down to 966,625. So just
yeah,
yeah,
right. We have the carryover in the other sources.
okay.
Right. So if you look at the middle column here, that carryover, and I guess it's a little, we're actually putting in a little bit less than we have for carryover, but that's, that's
Okay.
already money in the bank. We have that money, that we got that last year. It's there. We're ready to rock and roll with that money.
Yeah.
So if it makes sense, if it would be less confusing, Jess and Janet, we can redo the application and take that out of there.
No. I mean, that's good enough for me.
We wanted to show our work. We
Yeah.
we sent this to capital, $1.8 million, almost $1.9 million, and they're like, whoa, what is that? So we did some work. We sharpened our pencils. We put our, we wanted to show it. So this is what we're looking for funding. I don't know if there's any other questions on that.
I know I was part of some of the conversations, with discussing, the design and such, but the port in place is a huge cost, a big line item. And I wonder, because we also had talked about an engineered wood fiber as like just an option. And one of the things, again, coming from the background that we have had with the arsenic contamination from the former playground, and knowing how much conversation is happening related to PFAS contamination and things, and that poured in place is not without significant scrutiny related to these risks. I just wonder if the wood fiber conversation was pursued anymore. And if that would also possibly be cheaper. And again, it's so hard to get a pulse or an understanding of the contamination risks. So I hate to bring it up, but I think it is a real issue because they're just starting to get more and more understanding on PFAS, the forever chemicals that we've already dealt with our water. And I've seen some statements from Toxic Use Reduction Institute at UMass Lowell related to port in place very recently, so I would have brought this up, sooner had I understood it, but I just wanted to sort of mention it now, just that we don't end up in a similar situation. I don't think the regulatory agencies have kept up with what they need to do in a way. So, it's just kind of this tricky time to be doing things like this.
So,
Well, the regulators, they don't react until something is, a problem, right? A known problem. And it's not a known problem until somebody gets sick or something, happens catastrophic. So unfortunately, but this is the first I've heard of that, Beth, and I don't know that you can't. The reason we're going with the port in place is the wood chips, they're not as ADA compliant. They're hard, for kids. Like we have a lot of patrons in wheelchairs, but one is enough, right? So
Oh yeah.
it's hard for so it's hard for somebody that's got some disabilities to be able to move through those. The other thing is they shift with rain, and they shift with the movement of the people playing on the playground and everything. So that's an effort for us to make sure that they're smooth throughout. So those are the biggest reasons where we didn't decide that. But look, I'm not going to say that we're going to go with a contaminated product if that's a major concern. So we'll have to look into this. The first time I heard it. Justin, you had something to add to that?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, Jason, the reason for the port in place was very specific. It was for ADA compliance and for safety. It was, according to Randy from Beta, who's our designer, it almost is the only way to go, the way he made it sound. Obviously, some don't, so it's not the only way to go. This is the first I've heard about the potential contaminants of port in place. So we don't necessarily have to, we haven't had the design finished yet. It's still being done. I mean, it's not like we can't change something if at the 11th hour something comes up that's so determining that we want to change direction on one of these components. We can certainly look at it. So Beth, maybe you and I can look at that offline a little bit to see where that is, and at least explore that a little bit before finally making that trigger. But that said, it's still going to be, that material is going to cost money, I would assume. And obviously it's not going to be nearly as much as that $300,000 port in place. I mean, when I heard that price, I wanted to throw up. I couldn't believe it, how much that was. And so obviously it's not something I'm really happy about spending. But at the same time, based on, Randy's, who's been working on these playgrounds, made it sound like that's really the way to go if you want to be ADA compliant and maximize safety. So I think that we can certainly explore that some more if you'd like to. And actually, I did want to talk to you more about that nature-based play area as well, because I was hoping that you might want to start working with Randy on that now that we're actually at the phase of starting to put that design together.
Right. Sounds good. And yeah, I'd be happy to, I'll share an article. Again, I had heard some other things recently about, like just PFAS being encountered in a variety of places. And then once I looked, I was shocked to see how much, what sort of work related to port in place has happened. So I will send you some articles as well. And I'm happy to, have follow-up conversations.
What do they say? Like 95% of the people in this country have that in the system. I mean, it's in your It's in your upholstery. It's in your, you sit on it, you lay in it in your bed. It's everywhere. Jeff,
and we'll put a plug in for the PFAS in your health study that is underway right now. And if residents haven't
Kristen's
already
doing
signed
it.
up to participate, there is an opportunity to do so. Just look for information on the PACE site.
There was a
I
recent
like to keep my
study,
blood to myself.
there was
Sorry,
a recent study
Kristen's
that
doing it,
said,
though.
yeah. There
Sorry,
was a
Jen.
recent study that just said that eating one freshwater fish in this country gives you like a year's worth of exposure to PFAS now.
Whoa.
Yikes.
Yes, it is everywhere.
Well, while we're all grappling with those realities, it still is important, as Beth is saying, to be thinking before we're yet again installing something that might be somewhere, which you guys are thinking. This is a wonderfully thought-filled project, and you know how important this playground is to my family. But yeah, we've got a complicated conversation on this, huh?
Agreed.
I'm happy to, move forward with the funding request with some of those details yet to be determined as more research comes. The only thing I would say, because I think there is a lot of interest in this across the town. And I'd almost be inclined to say, would it be better to raise the number to 600,000 or something like that?
Hey, we'll take as much money as you want to give us. I mean, it certainly would help us with capital and help us with the select board, the more we can get from CPC.
Yeah.
We didn't want to be too greedy, but I think we can justify the cost at town meeting, especially with CPC, because that money's already there. And if it's the money, the capital is the tough thing because we have to raise it. That doesn't, town has to, that money's coming from somewhere that, has to be funded. It seems like the select board's a little bit hesitant to use some of their other funding. So as much as we can get from CPC is definitely going to help our costs.
I think Jess makes a good point, like if you go ahead and we can always reduce it, but you can't always increase it.
Yeah.
So, so with that, go ahead.
But we are still relatively early in the budget cycle. So, we don't have to take a vote yet either, but we can say that we're willing to consider a higher number. You can see how, discussions, or if you feel like you would rather it be a higher number and have a definitive answer now, let us know. I guess, there, I'm not sure where they're at with the capital decision making exactly. So let us know if you think it is really helpful to have something more definitive from CPC now, or if waiting until capital makes their decision and then coming back to us and clarifying a number makes sense. Just, whatever you think.
Well, the
Yeah, I'm going to let Jeff kind of talk about, because he's had more conversations with Robert and the capital planning committee than I have, but I can say that they're sort of waiting on CPC to put any numbers on there on both capital and the select board. But Jeff, you can talk more to that.
Well, I think it's been mostly, I think everyone pretty much has an understanding of it, but to clarify, we have been seeking 3 different funding sources. Obviously, we're here with CPC, capital planning, and then with the select board, they have potential funding opportunities through various funds that they have control of, such as ARPA funds and help me out, Jason.
UDAG.
UDAG.
Is what it was.
So these are, different things. In conversations with all of the other 2 funding sources, as Jason said, it's something they want to hear what other boards are committed to doing too. So we've been bouncing from board to board, and this is probably our 6th meeting we've had with a different board source. First one we do, but we've done quite a few others. And we'll be going back to the capital planning tomorrow. So, we've been trying to work with everybody, and as Jason said, trying to be fair and not overexert fundings from any one source. We really appreciate the idea of going beyond that 500,000, and what I'd like to think is that if we were able to do the project, once it goes out to bid for a lesser amount, then if we were able to utilize less of the CPA funds, I believe they return back to the CPA fund where they came from. They don't go to general fund. That's correct, Janet?
Correct. It goes back to CPA fund.
Thank
Yep.
you. Yes.
So that's the other thing that I was going to say is like, even if it goes up and you spend less, it's still in the fund. And also, you know, it's a great leverage for those other grants that Alan may be helping you with and such. So, when you see that type of support. The other thing, like, you know, Beth, when you were talking about, you know, of coming up with a number, I know that we're thinking about March, if this moves forward, you know, to have a public hearing in March. So we would have to have something nailed down for that, because I believe the end of March is when all the warrants will get closed for the April meeting. So we're gonna have to have that all squared away. All right, any other, I mean, Jason, can you do me a favor? I know that you've got some layouts.
Yeah, real quick, Jeff, can you go through the timeline real quick?
Yeah, certainly.
This is the hopeful timeline. We get all of our money in order.
Yeah. So as you can see from this timeline that's up on the board here, we've been completing the remediation end of things, and that's pretty much done. So now we're going to be working with our consultant Beta, who is also, we've hired to work on the design of the playground. We've talked about that. So that will be going on in the next couple of months. Then we're going to be trying to secure the funding through the different boards to go to town meeting in April. And then with luck, be able to come up with the funds that we saw on the previous chart that we were looking for the total funding of the project, both for the entire project, or failing that, at least enough to do everything without having to do the final phase with the adventure area. But we're hoping to get funding for all of it and do it all in one project. Then from there, we hope to put the bids out as quickly as possible. And that's a timing issue because we really can't put it out to bid unless we've secured the funding, right? So we won't know, even though we don't have the funds yet, once we have those funds committed to town meeting, we can put that bid right out. So our goal is to try to have a design together and a bid package ready to go right after town meeting. And, you know, obviously, if we don't get the funds at town meeting that we're looking for, then we're gonna have to adjust it. But if not, then we can put that bid right out. And most people in this meeting are familiar with the bidding process, municipal bid processes. So they go out, you have a couple of weeks, and then you get the returns on them. Successful bid is the one that you pretty much have to go for the lowest bid. And ideally, that would happen sometime in May. At that point, the contractor would have a certain amount of time to get going on it. One of the things that could trip us up is the amount of time it's going to take to get the actual playground materials, the components. I believe, do you recall, Jason, how long it is? I think it's a 12-week, or is it long, a 16-week period? It can be a long time to get shipped up.
That's what it was. Who knows what it's going to be?
Yeah, so
You know,
that's where we were really hoping to get, you know, a different type of funding that we might be able to purchase that stuff right off the bat. But then when we talked to the select board about that, they made a very good point that, well, what if you buy it and then you don't get any funding to build it? So we can't be there either. So unfortunately, it looks like that's going to push everything up to maybe, you know, getting that we can begin some part of the construction while we're waiting for those actual components to arrive. And then we'd like to think, with an optimistic view, in September, we could complete the project and have a grand opening before the weather turns on us. That's our ideal timeline.
Between
So,
town
okay,
meeting
thanks,
and July 1st, when the new fiscal year would come into, you've got the 500,000 carryover that would allow you to start work
that's right.
also.
Yep.
And the
And if we
CPC
did
funds
get-
wouldn't be subject to the fiscal year because
Yeah.
we have them available.
Okay, So they would
Exactly.
be ready
So we
after.
could purchase the material, the stuff at that point, because we'd have enough money to
And the-
purchase the actual equipment, and that would be very helpful for the timeline.
Yep. And the funds from, if we got UDAG or ARPA funds, those would also be available right away. So, you know, we could have 80% of the funding available to us right there in April. So that'd be good.
And April 24th
here's-
is town meeting is April 24th.
Right. So, you know, right there, before the end of April, we might be able to get the bid package out. Here's just a few artist renditions or computer generator renditions. So this is the older kid play area, the younger kid play area. These are the zip lines that people like, our swings. This is obviously all poured in place. These brown pads, and then these will be walkways, poured walkways, and then some grass area. Oops. This is just a different look, so you can kind of get some perspective. I think this is going to fill out the area a lot more than it seems in here. You know, it seems like there's a lot of space in between, but that's sort of the way these playgrounds are built now. They're not like the old days where they just packed everything so densely together. This is that the big play area. So we talked about how it has more of a nature or natural looking feel. So these are, you know, this is like composite material, this brown area. I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but the brown area, and then like these are more like a harder plastic composite, fake rocks and things. So that's just a little kid area. That's a little bit bigger than what we have down at the park at Sandy Pond Beach. You know, has the slide and stuff. So, and that's it. So these were all attached to those images were all there on what we sent to Janet, what Janet sent out. So if you want to take a closer look at them, that doesn't include the adventure or the play, nature play area. Those are yet to be designed. So.
All right. And like I say, Cindy has put them out on the website for requests for funding on the CPC website. I'm going to go ahead and leave it open. Any questions that the committee might have?
I have two. Is that, but
Okay.
one's actually to Janet. What is our, and I'm sorry if I don't know this offhand, but what is in our recreation fund? Like what amount do we have?
I'm sorry, I don't have it right here in front of me, but it's over
All right.
500.
Yeah.
It is over 500.
But we also have the undesignated then too, which is a lot larger, so.
Okay. And I guess similar to that, since we have you here, Jeff, I don't know if this is a fair question, but the only other piece I'm thinking about is you would have a good pulse on what other pieces of recreation might be needed. My instinct being a user of this playground and our many facilities in town, that this is the big kahuna. But is there anything else, I don't know, that we should be keeping in mind?
Further, like structure opportunities to add to this?
No, or I think greater town interest for recreation. I mean, I know you're not the only one who would come for recreation uses. So I don't mean this specifically, but I guess, are there any other big projects? This is
Yes.
it, right?
The next big recreational projects we are looking at are rehabbing the basketball courts at Crony Park, which are very outdated. And the asphalt surface is in really rough shape on a couple of the courts. We've done some work on them to try to fix them up to make them playable, but that's going to continue to erode. So that's a big one. We've also been looking into doing some research on a skating rink that we can use for both street hockey and ice hockey in the winter. Although, you know, I'm not sure when we're going to get a winter back that's going to be cold enough to freeze ice again.
Yeah.
You know, obviously
Well,
we're not.
we talked about
right? We're not gonna be doing something like that, but something, if you're familiar with, Fitchburg has a rink that's actually really nice. That's used for both, street hockey in 3 seasons, and then they flood it for, ice hockey and skating in the winter. So that's another recreational,
We
project.
talked about it doing like, having it like a multi-sport play surface. So we could do deck hockey, we could do pickleball, basketball, you know, like on a multi-use surface there. And then the next really big thing that
He's going to the bridge.
gotta do,
He's going to the bridge.
not the bridge, not the bridge. It's not awesome, but it's needed, and it will be awesome. But it's the bathhouse at the beach. That is absolutely got to get done, and that's going to be a big price tag. But you know, it's something that we got to bite the bullet on sooner than later. I don't know if CPC can fund that, but we're going to be asking for money for that at some point.
Well, right now in open space, we've got approximately 1.2 million.
Yeah, and Julie, just to get back to you to finish up, we're obviously open to all sorts of different ideas and opportunities. So if you or anyone else ever has thoughts about things, we'd like to explore them. We have a whole feasibility criteria that we have set up for anybody who wants to either start a program or develop some type of play area or system. So we actually have a whole means to explore those things. So if anyone does, we love to hear about that stuff.
Thank you. That was awesome. I really thought you were going to say, no, this was it. So I shouldn't be surprised that we have many more goals and aspirations and we're all working for those things. But I'm with everyone else, and this is what this funding is for. And this is a big need for our town. And I have to say, I feel this loss very deeply and personally. And I know it affects many, many families and people who enjoy that space. The lack of exercise and sanity that Peroni Park provides is deeply missing. So I would very much support and think this is a priority for CPC to fund.
What do you think about raising the amount from 500? I mean, we could definitively think about that. And then again, at town meeting, it can always be reduced, but it can never be raised. But
I was going to jump in and say I would support raising it to 600,000 for sure. I mean, I think this is such a huge project, and getting it done and the ability that it's going to come through all at once. I just would hate to see it fall short because they don't get enough money. So it sounds like we have it in the bank, and it's why we went for the 3% to have funds for big projects like this. So
Yeah, that's correct. And also too, I mean, I think
I could really quick, to your point, it's all of this bidding process, municipal bidding process, is a guessing game. And just to give an example, with the remediation that we just had done, and when we put that out to bid, we ended up getting it for $173,000 is the lowest bid. We were hoping for more like 125 to 150, but we got one up to 173, and we were happy with that. If that company didn't bid on it, the next one, I believe, was like 400 and something. So, you know, you just don't know what you're going to end up for a lowest bid. Sometimes it actually goes under, but you just can't be, you know, guaranteeing you're going to get what your estimate's going to be out there. A contractor has to bid on that price. So more money
DPW just
better
did that, right?
have available to us.
I mean, this is a community-wide use.
Right.
And once it's done right, it'll be years and years in use, so.
Mhm. And I think we learned our lesson, or you'd say the town learned the lesson with regards to the high school and the athletic field. I mean, they had to come back and ask for more money on the athletic field when it could have been all done as one component. And it's like, okay, you know, how come you didn't ask for it then? So it's good that it's all put together. And I think that that makes a big difference. And especially when we show on how it is for the community, ADA compliant, I think that that's, you know, a major hurdle because the other one wasn't. So I'm also one that says, yeah, let's increase it because we can reduce it if need be.
Mhm.
Anybody else? Beth?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
So
So-
can I ask why we're just picking 600,000? Like, what if we did half of the project?
I'd be
750.
in favor of that too.
What?
I'd be in
Well-
favor of that too.
Like, I think we're all cautious people, but our town voted in support of what we're doing in order to get these matching funds. And like, this is a huge project as to why we exist and why we had that state match and why
Yeah.
we're supposed to be leaned on for the town.
Oh, I'm happy to go up, but,
Can I ask a quick question about town meeting? I'm sorry, of course, they're right outside the door making noise, so hopefully you can hear me. If we go to town meeting and we bring forward 750 as the amount and the town's not happy with that much, can that be brought down? Like, can that be amended from the floor even if the town is not happy with that amount? If that's the case, I say we have the funds. I'm also in favor of going bigger.
I'm sorry, Jeff, this has got to be hard for you to hear.
Well, I'm just keeping my mouth shut because the number keeps going up, so.
They're like,
I-
it's like Price is Right.
Seriously, it's just overwhelming. I am quite overwhelmed with the support you guys are offering this. Thank you.
All right, so I would say, I would
appreciate it.
support Colleen. I was happy with 600, but I'd support Colleen, 750 it is. And again, it can come down at town meeting if, there's a need.
And I think the whole thing is, let's get it done, where
Yeah.
this way here, we don't have to, to do any type of nickel and diming. And again, if it's not needed, it just goes right back to CPC or CPA fund.
I would hope that our meeting is sophisticated enough to recognize that this money is already there. That we're not raising any more money. We're not doing any debt exclusions. We're not raising taxes to get the money's already there. It's there, sitting there, ready to be spent. If we were to ask capital for this money, well, now that's a burden. That's a different burden on the taxpayer that they didn't have before.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I would hope that something like that can be explained. Yeah, it's a big price tag, but we're already paid. It's already there. We already have the money for it. If you fund it this way, you don't have to spend more money on it by funding it, through capital. But
Well, and then
Who
the
knows
select
with
board
town
has
meeting.
those funds that they have available, but those are good for them to have available for other emergency
Mhm.
uses too. And this is very specific to one of our CPC categories, so.
Right. Yeah. And also too, the town will be asking, what the balances are within each one of the categories. So, because we'll be doing the disbursements, and with that, again, we do have it. My only word of caution is if we do ever want to go ahead and start looking at purchasing land, I know we have the 500,000 in the conservation fund. Yeah, the 500,000 in conservation fund. But also too, we need to use some of the budgetary and open space as well for that.
Yeah.
So that would be my only
much?
word of caution. Go ahead.
how much how much is generated? What's the income or the revenue, I guess, that we get annually that gets diverted into these funds?
Again, it's been going up where, Jason, let me get, I'm gonna have to.
Yeah, I don't need that answer tonight, but I mean, if that's the talking point, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of all the questions that will be asked. We have X amount in this fund. Well, can we can spend this year, but next year we'll have all this more money coming in. We can divert it into those funds and not spend money on recreation next year.
Right. Well, I mean,
spend that money on open space or something. I don't know.
Well, that's one good thing about April meeting is because we'll have the disbursements. And I believe it's usually, I'm going to say 600 I think last year was 672,000. All right, that's what came in from the 3% as well as the state match. I believe that's how much. So.
And you have to do a minimum of 10% to each.
Each
thing, right?
category. And the rest we throw into budgetary reserve because then it gets to be used anywhere. All right.
I mean, I'm fine with with an increase. I think, I really hope that at some point we'll have opportunities to acquire open space and that's going to take a lot of money, but, it's hard to keep holding on to it whenever we haven't had opportunities, and we do have, state partners, that we would hopefully be able to work with as well. But, I think, I've always thought that, having $1 million for open space is a reasonable position to be in, at least to offer it fairly nimbly. And if we would grant up to the 750, I think we're still pretty close to that when we consider the trust fund and, additional income for this next year. So.
And while I think, I fully support and want us to be able to buy that land, I think it's also glaringly obvious we own land that we're not using. It's literally just sitting there, not used. So this is an appropriate. Does that make sense? I'm going to just stop there.
No, I mean, it's a good use of funds because it's something that everybody is looking for.
Like, what good is our land if we aren't using it? Like, we have to at least be able to use the space.
Which
What
parcels are you talking about?
Peroni Park.
That would
Oh,
need.
you mean
used.
for
just
land we're
saying-
not using?
I'm just saying, if I'm looking at keeping funds, which I know is important to be able to buy land, I'm balancing that with the idea that this money is going to land we're not using right now because it's shut down. Like,
Yeah, the
This-
Peroni
this
is definitely
to
a
use the
priority.
land we
Yeah.
own.
Yeah.
And so in some ways it's similar. It's not quite the same, but similar.
So Janet,
I thought you were talking about parcels that we're not using. I'm like, oh, which ones is she referring to?
Just Peroni Park.
the next step would be to have a public hearing on this at our next meeting?
Correct.
Okay,
That's one thing that I'd asked the group. Do we want to move this forward to a public hearing in March?
it's a terrible project, no. Yes,
All right, let me have a motion.
I'll make a motion to move this forward to holding a public hearing at CPC's next meeting in March to look at, to evaluate this application for 750,000 in funding.
Mm-hmm.
As to
Alright.
whether we put it forward to Springtown meeting.
All right, that sounds great. That's Jess. Can I get a second?
Seconded.
All right, I'm gonna do a roll call. Jason, I've got to have you step aside on this one. Jess,
Aye,
Beth,
Yes.
Colleen,
Aye.
Julie,
Yes.
all right, and the chair says aye. Do I-
Jason, I mean,
Jason can vote. Can you-
yeah, we're all representing specific things, so
That's
I've
true.
voted on conservation things.
I think Jason's gonna vote no, but go ahead.
So no one, how can I possibly vote no on anybody's initiatives tonight? I owe you all a ton of my political capital.
All right, so I gather Jason's yes
Um,
and chair's yes. Right?
Well, I didn't know you wanted me to vote. I thought you wanted me to abstain.
No,
Well,
vote.
I gather not.
Yeah, I'll abstain. But
No, I'd
No,
say.
no, no, I want you to vote. I thought you had it to, but I gather you don't.
okay.
So you can vote.
Then yes.
All right. All right, so that's unanimous. All right, so March 1st, plan on a public hearing. I'll put out the announcement 2 weeks beforehand. And I
So
think
do
that,
you want us to send an amended application with the new number?
yes, That and also
Okay.
too, I want to work on that 3-column slide with you because it is confusing having the funds that are still available being used. It needs to be reworded somehow. So I'll go ahead and I'll work on that with you.
Yeah, thank you. And
And-
thanks everybody for your support.
And the warrant articles for information are due March 31st.
Correct.
So,
That's why it'd be good to go ahead and get that.
And
All
so
right.
we're gonna meet with Capital tomorrow and just tell them, we'll report to them, look, CPC voted to, move this to the next step for 750 for funding and see what they want for a number from them, I guess. And we'll keep going there, filling in the blanks.
All right, excellent. Thank you
Yes,
for,
thank you.
for all your hard work as well, because I know what it's like to go through all these different meetings and everything, so. all
Yes,
right.
thank you both very much and good luck with the rest of the meeting circuit. We appreciate your efforts.
It's like concerts, but less fun.
We try, that's like, all right, let me,
This was great. Well, this was a good one.
I'm glad. It's like, okay, so we've got that application approved, moved on. I'm gonna go ahead and say, is there anything that we want to bring up for anything else for new business? I do want to ask a question of Colleen. Is the housing trust gonna come up with 90,000?
Yes, so I was going to ask about that. Yes, we want to go ahead, so that you've heard about the 90,000 as a possible ask. So that was something I was asked to bring for discussion to the committee tonight. And then we are meeting as a housing trust next week. So we last year had requested 60,000 in funding for the rental assistance program to expand to 10 families. We're in the application process for those 10 families for this year. Because of delayed start in the program, we have some funding still left over. And so we're starting to think more long-term about other types of affordable housing projects for the town, and whether, in terms of acquiring, properties and such. And so we wondered about coming this year, if there was money for 90,000, which would actually, between what's left over, so anticipated from what we've asked for already, would get us through 2 years of funding. So we wouldn't come back for more rental assistance money over the next 2 years, and instead could start thinking more long range planning as a committee for other affordable housing projects. But I wanted to check on what there is in the housing pot, and whether, because we do also anticipate that Air Commons is moving forward and maybe coming back within the next year for more funding as well. So keeping that in mind to kind of get a sense of what the committee's thoughts are.
I'm looking, like I say, they're giving me different spreadsheets now. So from what I can tell, I want to say, yes, we do have the 90,000. If not, definitely we do have it out of budgetary reserve. So that would be fine. Do you think you can get an application ready for March 1st? Now,
Yes,
with
like
that,
I said, I think that is, and Jeff is on here, and I don't know if he wants to pipe in as well, but I think the plan is that we'll, finalize that application at the next meeting to bring it to CPC. Does that put us on the right time frame to have a public hearing, though, or
could we do a second public hearing later in March?
we're going to have to, because we have to review the application before, okay,
Yeah.
before we can do, so we're going to have to do a second public hearing in March.
I
Um,
would,
Go ahead.
I would recommend that we have all of our public hearings on the same night. So if we anticipate more projects are coming in like this one, I would like to defer the scheduling of the public hearing for the recreation one to be on the same night. So we just have one, big push to try and get public participation on the CPA public hearings.
Okay. All right,
Wouldn't be opposed to that.
I'm well for that. So so hold on then. So the first will be just reviewing the housing application and then a public hearing later on in the month. Which again, we're gonna need at least 2 weeks after that. Jeff Tillotson does have his hand raised. Go ahead, Jeff.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm having difficulty with my computer this evening, so you don't get my beautiful face. Colleen nailed it, which is we're trying to even out the money so we can move forward and go from 5 to 10 families for the period of time she's spoken about. And we would really appreciate having a public hearing, and I agree with Ms. Sudemeyer's suggestion that we do them all in the same evening, just because it's easy and gets people there. So anything I can do to help that out would be let me know what I can do, Janet. I'll help you out.
I just need the application by the 1st. And then, like I say, we need, after we get that application, again, we have 2 weeks that it won't be in the newspaper until the 10th and the 17th. So with that, we'd have to have something the week of the 20th.
So you say, I'm sorry, an application by the 1st of March?
Yes,
Yes.
What if we had the application to you by Friday?
we still have to meet to
review it.
vote,
Okay.
move it to a public hearing.
Thank you. So anyway, we'll get the application to you as quickly as possible. Madam Chair?
All right. No, that sounds good. And like I
Great.
say, we'll meet on it and discuss it on March 1st, which I don't think that should be an issue. Okay, but we just have to go ahead and do that step as being part of policy. And again, once we get that, all right, to move it to a public hearing, I've got to go ahead and send the notification to the newspapers. And that has to be done so that it will get published on the 10th and the 17th. So it goes back to public hearing sometime the week of March 20th.
We say March 22nd would be the Wednesday.
All right?
Yeah.
How are we looking at March 22nd for individuals?
Okay, thank you very much. And I just suddenly realized, and I'm sorry, my brain's been somewhere else this evening, but we will have to have the entire Housing Trust vote on this at our meeting on the 8th. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, so right now,
March 22nd works great for me.
all right, public hearing at 7 o'clock. March 22nd. All right, and we will possibly have two items. So there'll be 2 separate notifications made in the newspaper. I will check to make sure that that date's available for a Zoom meeting, and because it will be all done by Zoom. So, all right, anything else?
Good for me.
No? I'm gonna hold off on committee reports unless there's something that people do want to talk, just in case.
Nothing urgent on my,
Nothing urgent on mine either, so. Okay, like I say, I'll send a letter, a get well card to Barry from the group. And with that, if there's nothing else, our next meeting is March 1st. I can have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, Beth makes the motion, second.
Second.
Colleen seconds, and I think everybody says aye. All right, guys, thank you so much. This was really good. I do appreciate it. And Jeff and Jason, nice job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Good night, all.